name is Alison McConwell. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Philosophy at the University of Massachusetts in Lowell. It's a city just north of Boston. I'm very delighted to be a visiting fellow this semester at the Center for Philosophy of Science in Pittsburgh. Well, I'm a philosopher of biology, especially interested in the intellectual history of the evolutionary sciences during the mid 20th century. There are a wide range of interests that inform the way that I do my work. So I'm very curious about the relationship between science and society, really the way that science, whether it's good or bad or even harmful science, the way that it impacts our lives. Certainly, it's one of the most powerful tools that we have as a society, and we live with the results of science every day. And so that kind of social impact means that both pragmatic and feminist philosophies, they matter for the way that I conduct my work, given the kind of contact that they have with science's broader social and policy contexts. I do a lot of archival work, and I think that analyzing history can eventually help us in moving forward, whether that's to work towards correcting injustices that have been caused by institutionalized practices that have caused harm or are causing harm, and simply to better understand how values integrate and inform the day-to-day practices of working scientists with the kind of case studies that we can get from historical analysis. Lately, my focus has been on the role of values and politics shaping the ideological foundations of biology's modern synthesis. This is an era or an episode that occurred roughly around the 1930s to 1950s. It's very well known for bringing the work of Darwin and Mendel together, but it's also important for the way that it coordinated sciences relevant to evolution, like genetics, systematics, and paleontology, just to name a few. Sure, let me start with a bit of background. So, it's well known that social policies spanning the 20th century, that these were informed by eugenics movements inherently fraught with assumptions about biological determinism concerning things like intelligence, race, gender, class, and other sorts of human characteristics. And these movements aim to naturalize exclusion, often on the basis of views about what counts as, social adequacy or social inadequacy, and much of this was facilitated by ways to control reproduction. Now, philosophers in recent decades have challenged what's known as the value-free ideal of science, and generally they challenge the idea that science's internal practices operate as free from values by investigating the social nature of scientific communities, but they also recognize that scientists each come with their own perspectives, their own histories, they occupy their own social locations with respect to one another. Yet, despite some of these broader philosophical insights, there is some work that follows the modern synthesis that arguably contributes to narratives about how the content of that science is somewhat insulated from the larger social context of that period, despite some important and historical work that has been done. So, with this in mind, again, how do we think about values, again, whether good or bad or harmful, insofar as they affected the inner technical research of the modern synthesis and some of its most famous players? So what I find especially fascinating about the modern synthesis is the significance and visibility of celebrity scientists. So this included, of course, geneticist J.B.S. Haldane, R.A. Fisher, Sewell Wright, but also paleontologist George Simpson. We have other evolutionists like Ernst Mayr, Ledyard Stubbins, and of course Julian Huxley, who was a very well-known science popularizer at the time. Celebrity scientists arguably matter for how they organize social values within and around scientific research. So those who become good, or in some cases especially bad, at coordinating sentiments that motivate the public and that motivate one another are celebrity scientists. And now this is what gets into the specifics of my talk. Geneticist J.B.S. Haldane is somewhat famous for saying that we should, he asked us to imagine the biologist like a tailor, such as a clothes tailor, right? Who has the power to shape the future of evolution how we please, and to tailor it to our values. Now, Julian Huxley, one of Haldane's friends and colleagues. They spent a lot of time together at Oxford. Throughout Huxley's career, believed that we could manage evolution to curate the ideal human type, and that we could do this, and it would liberate us from social ills. Now, Huxley and Haldane, they agreed about some things, but they also debated one another as to whether humanity would or could progress, or whether we could control that progress, or whether humanity would inevitably degenerate or decline over time. Now, this conversation arguably shaped what was at stake, or shaped the stakes of the synthesis, or at least how those stakes were presented. And this conversation brings with it an array of very serious questions, right? Who gets to decide what counts as social ills? What does it mean for the educated elite, often from relatively wealthy backgrounds, to direct the way that science influences policy? How do their social values affect and integrate within their biological research? I think there's a lot that we can learn from this kind of case study. So while sometimes on the one hand scientific knowledge derived from evolutionary perspectives was used to support ideologies about social reform, in turn social values arguably influenced Huxley and Haldane's more technical conversations of what was at stake during this significant turning point in evolution's intellectual history. So it is really that integrative, reciprocal relationship between values and technical research that's of great interest to me, right? How they're entwined during this foundational period that shaped work in the life sciences going forward.